Yeah. Basically, we can just start. If you have, if you haven't any, if you don't have any projects open, you can just create a new project, or like you can work on the previous projects that we have worked on the previous workshops if you want. I will be basically using a brand new one. I'm just gonna delete this one. So yeah, the general plan that I have is basically we're gonna have this sort of game manager. We're also gonna have this little bullet spawner. And it will basically shoot some bullets. We're gonna basically create a prefab for this bullet so that like it will shoot down from this game object, and also obviously a player. It will be pretty straightforward basically. So yeah, first of all, I would like to just create a simple circle, and it will basically work as our sort of bullet. I'm just gonna create a basic circle, a 2D circle. You can just right click to the hierarchy and then just create a circle just like that. And also I would like to rename it to a bullet like this. You can just move it around and so on. You can also like change its color. Also, I would like to just create a simple square so that like it will basically work as our bullet spawner right here. We're basically gonna use this as a baseline, and then we will just shoot some bullets from it. A simple square, just like this. You can just stretch it if you want. I just want to lay everything to the screen so that like it's kind of like easier to follow. And also a simple capsule to represent our player. We have our recording, yeah. You can just rename this square to something like a bullet spawner, like this, or like a gun, whichever one you prefer. And then basically a simple capsule to represent our player. You can just change the color to something else, whichever one you prefer, and like rename it to a player. So yeah, basically, first of all, I would like to start with the bullet game object itself. In the previous workshop, we basically introduced Unity's physics system. So first of all, I would like to just create a circle collider 2D so that like it will detect collisions in the game. So you can just click to the bullet game object and like select add component and just create a circle collider so that like I'm basically planning to use Unity's physics system for the bullets as well, because like why not, it's pretty cool I guess. So, and also I would like to create a rigid body 2D. And by the way, like, can you all see the screen, like everything, the text and stuff? I can just stretch it out if you want, but yeah, all right then. So I would like to just create a rigid body 2D, and as you all probably remember from the previous workshop, circle collider is basically the bounds for the game object to detect collisions, and rigid body 2D is to basically make our game object a part of the Unity's physics simulation. And like, if you run this game, and by the way, like, be careful about the 2D parts, because otherwise, since we're gonna make this game 2D, the colliders, the rigid bodies, everything should be 2D. Just be careful about that. And like if you run the game, you're gonna see that the bullet falls down. We obviously don't want that because we're basically planning to make a 2D bullet hell game, and like we can. It's not a platformer game, so we really don't care about the gravity. So you can just get into the rigid body and set the gravity scale to 0, just like this, so that like when you run the game, it will just remain the same. But it will still get affected by the Unity's physics simulation, and like I kind of want to have this bullet to have a rigid body because like so that we can use the velocity system and all that, the velocity attributes. But obviously you can just use vanilla sort of like transform that position, maybe like adding some values to the coordinates. But I think using the velocity is a lot easier for this case. And yeah, that's basically, oh, and also since this one will be sort of a bullet, when it's with our player, I would like to just understand in the on trigger enter function that if it's a bullet or something else. Just because of that, I would like to create a new tag just for this bullet. So basically choose the bullet game object and click add tag right over here. And like it will open up a new screen. Just type in bullet, just like we did on the previous workshop. And like don't forget to assign this bullet tag to our bullet. So yeah, I already mentioned that, but the plan is sort of that we kind of want to find a way to basically take this game object, take this sort of bullet, and find a way to copy it and basically shoot them from this game object. That's sort of the plan here. So I would like to just, yeah, the shape of our shooter doesn't really matter, but like it would be better, I guess, if it's rectangular shape. I just want to create a new script for that. I'm just gonna type in, like if you all know, there are several ways to create a script. I'm just gonna type in bullet spawner. That will be the name of our script. If you press enter, it will just, add the script to your game. And obviously you can just right click and say create and choose C# script, and it will do the exact same thing. And by the way, any questions so far? We just created several game objects. If you missed anything, I can just quickly mention them. Yeah, all right. So anyway, what I want you to do is basically, like, if you created this bullet spawner, just attach this script inside this game object, and we can just start adding some functionalities to the bullet spawner. So yeah, like I mentioned, and also since we're gonna use game managers here, like the whole purpose of game managers are sort of, it's basically having a starting point. Oh yeah, sorry. Oh yeah, right here. You're welcome. So the whole point of game managers, by the way, like we didn't really got into the game managers. But basically, I'm planning to have the update function inside our game manager. And maybe that's a good idea to anyway, forget it. We're not gonna use any start and update functions inside this bullet spawner. What we really want is we just need a function to basically spawn bullets. Yeah, actually, we can just start creating this. I'm gonna make it public, a function that is public and void, and just call it spawn bullets. Maybe I can just like this. Yeah. So what I'm planning to do here is I just want to first somehow copy the bullet game object, and then basically have a starting point for the game object, and also have a starting velocity for that. Yeah, that's basically the plan. First of all, we would like to have something like a blueprint, so that like we can just something like a blueprint for our bullet. And as you all remember, we just created this bullet game object. What I want you to do is let's just have a reference of a game object created inside this bullet spawner, and let's just call it bullet blueprint or something like that, or just you can just call it, I don't know, bullet game object. Yeah, like if you save this script, you're gonna see that there will be some changes on the editor as well after it compiles. Yeah. So like since it's compiled now, from here you can just reference your bullet game object inside here, so that like we can basically reference it and have the exact same values that we have just created for this bullet game object. So yeah, you can just drag and drop the bullet game object inside this sort of area, or like you can just click this little dot and like select the bullet game object. So yeah, after that, I would like to just create or like copy an instance for this bullet game object. That's the plan. There is this function called instantiate in Unity. I think it's one of the most useful functions that you can have with Unity API, because it's basically letting you to create game objects in runtime. So we've been basically adding game objects throughout the Unity editor. But like with this instantiate function, we can just, you know, copy, like have a blueprint and then just copy like how many times you want, basically. I'm just gonna, and by the way, like this instantiate function returns an object. Sorry. Since the instantiate function returns an object, it will basically reference to the new copy that we have just created. So I'm just gonna call it new bullet equals to instantiate, and I'm gonna add the original value which we are going to copy, which is just this one, bullet game object. So yeah, and by the way, I might just want to, or no. Anyway, so we basically copied a bullet game object, and we're gonna add some initial values to it. First of all, I would like to just add a spawn point for that, and it will be just maybe have some blanks here, vector3 bullet spawn point, just like that. And I would like to spawn my game object like within this bullet spawner, right? Like it will basically take this bullet game object and create a copy of it and then just change its position right over here. And let's just do that. So as you'll remember, since we are inside, since bullet spawner is sort of a component for this bullet spawner game object, we can just access its positions, rotations, and everything. So let's just have transform.position so that like it will give us the current position of our bullet spawner. Like I mentioned, I would like to, spawn my bullets within this square that we just created. And by the way, maybe like I can just show it afterwards. Like yeah, maybe that's a good time. If I just create it like this, transform.position, it will just create it right over here, right in the middle. And that's kind of like a little bit ugly. I think that would be better if we just have it spawned over here. So if we just add a little value transform.right, it will basically add that distance over here to our position and basically spawn our game object over here. So that's quite useful. It's kind of like optional. Like if you spawn it in the middle, that's also fine. Yeah, and also let's just assign this sort of modified position to our new bullet. So new bullet dot transform dot position, and let's just assign this value to our spawn point. Hello. Like this. So afterwards, I would also like to have a starting velocity for this. As you all remember, we just created this rigid body for our bullet game object, right? So it will have a velocity value attached to it. So what I would like to do here is, I'm just gonna zoom it out a little. What I want to do is, I would like to first get the rigid body, new bullet rigid body. I would like to just get the component of this new bullet so that like we can manipulate its values, its velocity values, so that like it will basically move towards the velocity to the direction that we will just assign. Yeah, inside this angle bracket, let's just have a rigid body 2D right over here. And then, yeah. Now we can just refer to the rigid body of the new bullet that we have just copied and get its velocity like this. And also I would like to just, I kind of forgot to add it here. I would like to also have a speed value to it that we can manipulate. Let's just have it public float bullet speed that we can manipulate later if we want. So for velocity, what I would like to do is to have a direction for the velocity, and which will be here. My plan is basically this part will be the shooting part. So we will basically spawn this game object right over here and it will go to the right. That's basically the plan. So because of that, I would like to just add a, transform right. That will basically give the direction that we're gonna shoot. it will basically take the relative position of this game object, and it will basically give its relative right position. Like after we are done with this function, I think it will be more clear to see. And also, I would like to just attach or like multiply my bullet speed to my velocity, to my direction. Yeah, that's basically how you spawn a bullet. So just for visualizing it, maybe I can just create an update function right over here. But like, I'm just gonna, like, after showing it, I'm just gonna delete this update function and then like have everything inside this game manager so that like it's a better way of doing things, I guess. But like, if you feel like it, you can just keep the update function inside the bullet spawner. We can just, I don't know, call spawn bullets, just like that. And hopefully it will work. Yeah. The thing, yeah, I wasn't expecting that. But anyway, we can just have it, like we can just basically play around with it. The reason why I would like to, I wanted to add a timer is that so that like we can control the speed, or like not the speed, but the rate of spawning of the bullets, right? And also one other thing I kind of like forgot to do was basically, like as you can see, everything is sort of like overlapping with each other. I kind of don't want that. Just because of that, I would like to just change, like get into this bullet game object and set it to a trigger collider so that like it will detect its collision around it, but it won't basically bump into each other. That's basically the idea. Set this base bullets circle collider to a trigger and run your game. They won't bump into each other, just like this. So, any questions so far? So like, were you able to like make it just like this? We're gonna make it more clean. You can just, like if you have it on your screen, you can just play around with the initial values, maybe like change the color or like change the scale, just like that. So that like it looks a bit cleaner. And like, by the way, if you just rotate this spawner on the Z axis, oh yeah, like if you like rotate your bullet spawner on the Z axis, and by the way, like it will get a lot slower because we don't have any functionalities to, you know, destroy the bullets. So I kind of recommend you to not keep it open for a long time. But yeah, that's basically the main little idea that I had in mind for this workshop. So this one was basically a simple bullet spawner, and I would like to just have a little game manager so that like we can take inputs, or like we can just have an input from the player or like from the environment, and then we can just call this spawn bullets function inside the game manager that we're just going to create. So what I would like you to do is, let's just create an empty game object right from here, and let's just call it a game manager, just like that, an empty game object. And oh, and also I kind of forgot to mention, since like inside this assets folder, inside the projects tab, you can just create a new folder just for your scripts so that like it's more organized. You obviously don't have to do that, but I kind of like to have it a little bit structured view to it. So I'm just going to create a folder called script and add my scripts to it. I'm just going to create a new C# script right over here. Just right click, go to create and a C# script. And let's just call it, after it compiles, let's just call it a game manager. Just like that. And also after you create it, it will compile it again. And you're gonna see that it has a little gear icon to it. I honestly don't know why Unity has this design decision to it, but I assume like almost all of the games have a game manager, and it's kind of like a good thing to have so that like your game has an entry point and so that like it's more organized. Anyway, let's just attach our game manager component, game manager script, to our game manager game object. Just like that. It's an empty game object. We just added a game manager to it. And let's just open it up.
Where can I find that game manager object?
You basically, it's not a defined game object. What you have to do is you just have to just create an empty game object and name it to a game manager.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like a custom thing. And by the way, like you can just name it to something like, I don't know, game mediator, or like game, I don't know, system. It will still work. Anyway, let's just open the game manager like this. All right. So any questions so far? Like if you got into any problems, I can just help you out.
How do you get the game manager thing in your assets?
What you have to do is you just create a C# script and name it to a game manager.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the weird thing is when you name it to a game manager, it will just have this gear icon
Okay.
to it. It's kind of like weird, but I don't know why Unity does that. But
I think it's because most games name it that, and so
oh yeah,
it's like special.
yeah. Huh?
Are you recording?
Oh yeah, yeah. I checked. yeah, that's fine. So yeah, my plan for the game manager is we obviously gonna have a start and update function. As you all remember, like the update is called once per frame, and I kind of don't want. Oh, by the way, like just to avoid some bugs at the end for later, I'm just gonna comment this update function out inside the bullet spawner. We're not gonna call this. We're not gonna call this spawn bullets from the bullet spawner, but rather my plan is to reference this bullet spawner inside this game manager and call it inside the game manager so that it's more organized. So yeah, my plan here is to basically reference everything. Maybe, for example, yeah, let's just have a public like, by the way, we are inside game manager. Oh yeah.
It's not letting me add the game manager script to the game manager object. There's nothing there, right?
Huh? Let me just say. So anyway, let's continue with the workshop. There were some issues, and by the way, like if any, although if you have any like problems, I can just me or like Liz can help you with it. So yeah, for a brief recap, we basically just had this bullet spawner to spawn some bullets. But I just want to have everything inside this game manager, just like this. So if you open up the game manager right over here, I would like to just have a reference for our bullet spawner so that we can call its functions, which is just spawn bullets right over here. Let's just reference it and call it bullet spawner, just like that. And by the way, I would like to show a quick little thing. So after it compiles, you can just, select the game manager, and you can click this dot over here and then just select bullet spawner. But one other thing you can do, you don't really have to follow along in this one, but rather if there is no bullet spawner, anything attached to it from the editor, it will be just null. So we can just null check right over here. If bullet spawner is null, we can just find it on our own, just like that. Bullet spawner equals to game object. It's a static function. You can just type in the name of it. Oh yeah, and also it will basically return a game object. So what you really have to do is you have to get the component as well, since we're referencing to a bullet spawner, which is just a component. Like I said, you don't really have to follow along for this one. Yeah, just like that. Yeah, if you have that functionality inside your start function, you don't really have to select anything for it. It will automatically do it for you when you start your game. But I'm just gonna comment that out. It's just basically a small thing I wanted to mention. So yeah, we can have this update function. So right, we can just, since we have the reference for the bullet spawner, we can just call spawn bullets from the game manager, just like this, and it will work exactly the same. Nothing will be changed. Yeah, just like that. But what I want to do is I would like to add some timer so that it will, shoot bullets in every second or like every half a second. I'd like to add a timer functionality to it. So yeah, let's just have a private float, and let's just call it a timer and assign it to 0f. So this part might sound a little bit, complicated. You don't really have to understand it fully, but it kind of like requires a little bit of understanding on how frames and update function works, sort of. So yeah, what we are trying to do here is, I'm just gonna show it to you. Like there will be some functionality right over here. Just, I don't know, increase the timer, just a functionality to increase the timer. And then, since this update function will be called once per frame, this little timer will slowly increase. And then after it reaches a certain value, after it exceeds, I don't know, like 0.5 f, what we want to do is we would like to call this spawn bullets function and also reset our timer to 0f. And by the way, this 0.f will correspond to seconds. So like if it's 1, it will correspond to 1 second. If it's 0.5, it will correspond to, I don't know, like 0.5 seconds. So I'm just going to talk about this little functionality. So if we add time, the delta time, to our timer, it will basically give you this abstraction, give you this sort of like functionality so that like it will reach to 1f for every second. And I'm just going to explain it to you. So this update function, and by the way, like if you don't understand it, that's perfectly fine. It's a little bit advanced and it involves a little bit of mathematics. So I assume you guys are all familiar with the concept of frames per second. So like my game runs 60 frames per second and so on. And this command line, when we created this whole script, is kind of like important. Update is called once per frame. So that means if our game runs 60 frames per second, that means this update function that Unity API provides to us will run 60 times per second. So what does that have anything to do with this delta time? So this delta time will give you the milliseconds or like actually seconds between one frame to another. So for example, let's say our game runs 60 frames per second. And I kind of don't want to focus too much on it, but yeah. Let's say our game runs 60 frames per second. And that means update will be called times. Per second. If that's the case, since delta time is providing us with the time interval between frames, frame 1, frame 2, if our game runs 60 frames per second, that means since there will be like 60 frames, this little interval will be 1 divided by 60 seconds. I know it's a little bit complicated. Like if you play around with Unity, like if you work more with, I don't know, like this update function with game development and stuff, like things will become more clear. And like within this 60, like if we add this 1 divided by 60 value to our timer, after 1 second, it will just correspond to just 1f. And that's basically corresponds to 1 second. Like I said, you definitely don't have to understand that now, but just know that if you have this functionality over here, this little block will be called every second. And let's just run it real quick. And by the way, any questions so far? Yeah, as you can see, it's running more, like it's basically creating bullets every second. You can definitely play around with it, or like let's just have a little variable, a little public variable that we can play around with. I don't know, like float bullet spawn rate. Let's just call it 0.5f. Or let just don't have it. Like if you want it, you can just keep it. And yeah, you can definitely play around with it, just like that. If it's 0.5, it will obviously spawn bullets in a faster manner. And yeah, if you rotate this game object, you're gonna see that the spawn point, spawn rotation, velocity, everything sort of changes. And yeah, now I would like to sort of get into the prefabs. It will be relatively quick. So, like, as you can see, we're just this bullet spawner sort of referencing this bullet game object, right? And it's kind of like basically residing in our scene, in our game space. Instead, we can just have it inside a folder, inside a file, and we can just directly call it from that file instead of having it sitting right over here. Let's just get into the assets folder and like create a folder called prefab. Or prefabs, just like that. It's pretty straightforward. If you just drag and drop this bullet game object, I want this bullet game object to be a prefab, basically. If you just drag and drop into the projects tab, it will be like, as you can see, this bullet game object turned into blue, and that's basically a way to specify that it's a prefab now. If you, and I'm just gonna basically add some other instances of bullets to my scene. Like if you want, you can also do that. Or like you can also just copy and paste it and like move them around. And like if you copy and paste them, the position of them, like everything will be the same. So the thing is, you kind of have to move after you copy and paste around. Like, yeah. So prefabs are kind of cool because like if you double click it, it will basically give you a new view. So it's basically creating a unique scene just for that prefab so that like you can easily play around with it. So for example, let's just change the position of it into like 0 so that like it's better. Maybe like change its scale or like color to something else. Let's change it to red. Let's make some changes to it. Just like that. And if you save it, and by the way, like you can just, if you're into this prefab view, you can just click this little arrow button right at the top left. Or you can just select our sample scene right over here. Yeah, as you can see, whatever we change inside this prefab view, it will be basically added to the game object inside our game, just like that. Yeah, you can just play around with it. It's a useful thing to have. It's definitely making things a lot organized if you do that. But like, if you just prefer the other way, like you don't really have to use prefabs. You can just have a game object sitting around here. Maybe like you can just disable it, and whenever you spawn it, since we're sort of copying it, you can just activate it, spawn it, and the player is not going to see the original version of the bullet. Yeah, any questions so far? Like any problems that you got into? All right. And also, like, we can just make changes on our bullets from our prefab screen and just run our game, and you're gonna see that the spawn bullets will have the same attributes as well. So that's quite nice, I think. Yeah, that's basically how prefabs work. I'm just gonna delete the other instances of the bullets, just like that. Yeah. We have the timers, and yeah, maybe like now we can just create a player to our game, and like I assume we all have a player right over here. Like if you don't have any player created, you can just, I don't know, go into right click inside the hierarchy, select 2D object, and then I don't know, select a capsule. I'm just gonna create it again. So like if you don't have it, you can just follow along. If you have your player already ready, that's fine. I'm just gonna add a capsule collider to it, just like that. A capsule collider 2D part is quite important. If you miss that part, it might cause some errors to it. And also I would like to add a rigid body to our player right over here. And if you run your game, again, you're gonna see that the player falls down because there is a gravity attached to it inside the rigid body component. So let's just turn it into 0 if it is 1. Unassigned? What?
You should update your script.
Huh?
You have to update your script to use the prefab instead of the,
Huh.
or not the script, but instead of in the
Oh,
edit-
should I have... Oh, I see. Should I have the game object? So is that what you're saying? Oh, yeah, bullet spawner doesn't have anything attached to it.
Yeah,
I don't know what caused it.
because you got rid of the bullet and you made a prefab.
Oh, yeah, right. So probably you're gonna have this same issue as well. So like if you have the same issue, just be sure to reference your prefab to your bullet spawner right over here. Anyway, so we can just work on our player now. So the player itself will have some functionalities to it. Let's just create a little player script. Inside the scripts folder, and let's basically get into it. I just want to make it quick because like it's mostly straightforward and we already covered most of the stuff that we're gonna do. So yeah, this player will have a rigid body attached to it. I want to use physics and velocities for player as well, just like we did for the bullets. The player will have a player speed to it, and I'm just gonna assign it to, I don't know, 5. Just like that. And I'm just gonna use get component function to reference the rigid body of our player. So yeah, and by the way, you can just, I don't know, change the color of your player, and the script is just right over here. We basically created a reference to a rigid body and like got the component from the player game object. So like, do you have any questions so far? We just created a reference of a rigid body. So yeah, after that, I just want to have a function that we can call from the game manager, and it will be pretty straightforward. I'm just gonna call it public void set direction, and it will basically, based on the input, we're gonna update the velocity of our player using the rigid body. We're gonna get the new direction from the parameter and basically multiply it with the player speed. I'm just gonna have it right next here, so that like if you don't have it on your screen, you can just have it. So yeah, I'm just gonna have this little input system to actually, like, how are we doing on time?
It's with like 20 minutes.
20 minutes? Actually, like, I don't think I have enough time to cover the input system. So like, maybe I can just move the player from the editor, because like we already covered the physics system and input system. So I'm just gonna, just for displaying stuff, I'm just gonna use the editor. So yeah, from the player script, rather than that, I'm just gonna have a system that will detect, maybe I can just, it's better if I just have this over here. I just want this bullet to collide with my player right over here. As you can see, since every bullet instance is a trigger, it's not bumping into each other, like it's not detecting, nothing is happening, sort of. So just for that, I'm just gonna have a on trigger enter 2D over here. So like, if you attended the second workshop, we already covered that. It's basically a special function that Unity provides to us. I think it's quite important to have. So yeah, this function, like if you hover onto it, it will basically explain, like, yeah, like whenever a trigger collider basically collides with our game object over here, which happens to be our player, this function will be called. That's basically the idea behind it. So if we have a little bit of this. So yeah, this, like when this one is called, when there is a collision happening, a collider will basically attach to it, and this collider will give you some information about the collision that sort of happened, right? So because of that, you can just actually access the other game object that we have just collided with. So, and for our case, the thing that we're gonna collide is going to be tagged as a bullet. In our case, it's not. So yeah, like if you open up the bullet prefab right over here and like add a unique tag to it, if you don't have the bullet tag, you can just add a new tag, just create it right over here, and like call it a bullet. And if you open up the prefab again, you can just assign this bullet tag to it, so that like it will have a unique identifier to it, and whenever a collision happens with the player and the bullet, we can just compare tag, or like get the tag value and compare it with the identifier right over here. So for example, there happened a collision between a trigger and our player, and we kind of want to distinguish if that's a bullet or something else, because like in our game, when we are developing our game, like it might be colliding with other objects as well. What we want to do is we want to distinguish if it's a bullet. If it's something else, we're gonna do something else. If it's a bullet, we're gonna have a different functionality right over here. So if we are colliding with a bullet, we're just gonna basically debug.log, something like that. The player collided with a bullet, just like that. And maybe like we can destroy the object that we just collided. You can just get the game object and destroy it out right over here. So after that, and by the way, like any questions so far? By the way, you can just comment this part out. I just wanted to add a little like input system to the game, but since we don't really have much time to it, I just didn't want to have it just yet. So I'm just skipping that part. But like, do you have any questions so far? We just added this collision detection to our player. And if we run our game, and if we select like from the scene view, you're gonna see the game view, but you can actually select the scene view. You can just move your game object like this, but I don't know why it's not. Is it because I didn't save it? No. But I'm just gonna compare tag. Sorry about that. I was checking it. Probably we don't have the player script attached. Yeah, that's the issue. I see. So I forgot to attach the player script to the player game object so that it's not doing anything. But like if you place the player right on, you're gonna see that it collides with the bullets themselves, and then it will basically print out some stuff. If you want, you can just add some health system to your player if you want. Maybe like you can have a public float that corresponds to the health of your player, for example. Let's just, I don't know, 100, just like that. And whenever a collision happens with a bullet, let's just destroy the bullet game object and also decrease our health by, I don't know, 25 or something. And like, if health is, I don't know, less than 0f, I don't know, you can just prompt something to it. It's basically a termination state that you can play around with. I'm just gonna delete that part, but that's basically an idea that you can add to your game just like that. Yeah, like one last thing that I would like to do, we still have some time, is that I would like to rotate this bullet spawner to actually follow the player itself. I'm just gonna basically add this functionality to the bullet spawner. And by the way, like, any questions so far? Like, is everything working for you guys? All right. So, like, if everything is working, let's just open up the bullet spawner right over here. I'm just gonna have a new function that will basically take in a coordinate and follow that coordinate. That's basically the whole thing that I'm planning to have. Inside the bullet spawner, I'm just gonna make it bigger. So I'm just gonna create a public void face to target, just like that, and it will take in a vector position that we can just face our spawner to. One second. Yeah. We can just leave it blank, just like that. Target. I'm just gonna leave it blank for now. And my plan is, just like we call this spawn bullets inside our game manager, right? Like, this game manager is basically the entry point for our game, and like there will be only one update function, and it will take place in the game manager itself. I'm just gonna call this bullet spawner dot face to target just right over here, and it's sort of expecting a coordinate to follow, right? Just because of that, our plan is to face the spawner to the player. However, we are inside this game manager, but we are not referencing to any players. So we're just gonna have a reference to a player inside our game manager. I'm just gonna comment that out real quick, so that like after we reference our player, we can basically get its position. We can basically, like, from this player component, we can get access to its transform, just like that. Transform the position, and it will basically give us the current position of our player. And like, whenever this update function will be called, this bullet spawner dot face to target will be called, and it will correspond to the spawner to just facing towards the player, and that's sort of the plan. And before we get into filling this facing to target function, I just want to reference our player to the game object right over here. So sorry, the game manager. If you just click your game manager and select your player right over here, now we can basically reference our player inside this game manager. So I'm just gonna fill out this function right over here. So face to target. And by the way, like this part also involves some vector mathematics. I will try to explain some of the stuff that we're gonna do. So basically we will have a direction after we have, and by the way, like I'm just gonna call it target position. Yeah, target position. If we subtract the spawner's position from the target's position, it will basically give you a direction in the vector space. And by the way, like this one will cause an error because it's basically expecting, so transform that position is a vector 3 while the target position is vector 2. But if we just cast it into a vector 2, just like that, the error will basically go away. So yeah, basically where is, yeah. Yeah, we kind of need a target position. This one will be the target. And this one will be our spawner. Like in the vector space, if you subtract the position, the coordinate from this over here, it will basically give you the direction of it. That's basically how it works. So with this direction, I'm just gonna use a function to get the angle. So Unity is providing you with several mathematical libraries. So like if you get the tangent of the direction.y, direction.x, and by the way, like just as what we have done with the timer, you don't really have to understand this part fully, but what you really have to understand is that this sort of like functionality, like everything will result into our bullet spawner to face our player. And like after this calculation, and it will basically return a radian value. So like if you just multiply it with this constant value, it will basically magically give you the angle right over here, so that like, I don't know, so that we can basically manipulate the rotation of this bullet spawner with this angle that we have just got from this equation. And we can just basically transform the rotation. And like we've been using transform that position. You can also use, I don't know, transform that local scale and everything. And we can basically access the rotation as well. Right over here, that like the transform component has position, rotation, scale, everything. Similar to other stuff, we can just access the rotation. And if you just do quaternion Euler, and it will basically give you a quaternion value. By the way, like yeah. and I forgot to mention, like we are going to rotate our bullet spawner, but we only care about the z-axis. We don't really care about rotating the 0 and y-axis, since we're just, like, our game is in 2D space, so we don't really care about like rotating our bullet spawner like this. So because of that, we're just gonna use this function, and this static function will basically return us a quaternion value based on the values that you attach to it. So we basically want to, for example, let's say the angle between our spawner with our target is, I don't know, 30. Then what we want to do is we want to change the Z rotation to 30, just like that. And we're basically attaching it to the transform.rotation value right over here. So, and that's basically how this function works. If you don't have it in your update function, you can just reference it just like that. And if we just play our game, you're gonna see that, like, if you move your player just like that, and I'm sorry about that, I kind of wanted to have an input system, but I don't really have much time to add it. So yeah, like if you move your player just like that, this rotation functionality will basically rotate your spawner just like that. And also, like, one other idea, like, I'm not gonna code it because, like, I don't really have much time left, but maybe, like, if you want, you can just have, I don't know, a public list of bullet spawners, just like that, spawners. And let's just dereference it, no, comment it out. You don't have to follow along in this one. I'm just gonna copy and paste some instances of it. And like manager is now, not now. The game manager should expect a list. Oh yeah, I'm just gonna comment those out. And by the way, like I will share the source code, so like if you miss anything from the workshop, you can just always refer to them. So yeah, like we have this list of bullet spawners, and we can just actually add these bullet spawners just like here. Like we can just select them if you want, just like that. And instead calling those functions one by one, we can actually, I don't know, like, just want to make it quick. Yeah, we can basically have something like a for each loop right here, bullet spawner in spawners, and just call every function that we have just created, but for every spawner inside this list. It's sort of like working the same. The only difference is that we're basically storing them. Like, the only difference is that there are multiple bullet spawners. So I'm just gonna copy it and paste it. and instead face to target, we can just call spawn bullets. And after it compiles, you're gonna see that like 3 of them will follow the player and like shoot bullets with the same rate of fire. You can just change it to something smaller to make it spawn bullets faster, or like maybe like change the speed that we've just added at the beginning of the workshop, and we can definitely play around with it just like that. And yeah, that was basically what I had planned for the workshop. Thank you all for coming. I'm just gonna show you, like, there are some useful links that you can refer to. Like, there are tons of materials that you can refer to, or like you can come to our office hours. Actually, like, you change the name into something else.
It's like a game craft session.
Yeah, game craft session that happens every Thursday.
Thursday, 6 to 7 in this room. So basically, if you want to take the stuff you learned tonight and like make it into a proper game, come work on your game and get help with it. And on Thursdays, we hang out in this room from 6 to 7. So.
And like, yeah, if you have any feedbacks, you can just scan this QR code to give feedbacks. Or like, if you're not in our Discord, or like you're not in our listserv, you can just join with those. And tomorrow, I think we will have a Pico 8 workshop that Justin will do. You're welcome to come. I think it will be quite nice. And the next Unity workshop will take place in like 3.
After spring break.
Yeah, after spring break. So you can just follow the announcements and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would appreciate you guys' feedback. Even if you had a good time, if you had a bad time, especially, we want to hear feedback to improve. Basically, next week we'll have a twine workshop, which is like storytelling and writing. Tomorrow, and then next Wednesday we're finishing up Pico 8. So that's why the next Unity workshop is